Good morning to the world. My name is Dairuka and I am a first-time video creator. If you'll do me the honor of allowing me to introduce myself, I've been a fan of strategy games as well as Victoria 3 since its release. In fact, I am one of the few people in the world who actually loves Victoria 3 more than Victoria 2. It's blasphemy, I know. But I can't help myself. There's that part of my mind that absolutely adores watching the numbers go up and up and up in high definition, even if the combat mechanics aren't that good. I'm also somebody who doesn't claim to have all of the answers. The majority of my starts are cobbled together by knowledge gathered from me personally playing through a few times before I record anything, coupled with everything to be found on Reddit, the Paradox forums, other YouTube videos, as well as the YouTube comments section, which means I learned almost everything I know from you, the Victoria 3 community. Finally, I don't claim to be the creator of these startups, but I do claim to be one of the ones crazy enough to put it all together on video so you have something to listen to while you wait 5 minutes for Victoria 3 to load up. Now, with all of that out of the way, we're going to be jumping directly into the fire by picking one of the more difficult major countries to play as, Great Qing. I consider them difficult despite having a very high GDP, a very, very high population base, a myriad of arable land to play with, well, because of their low literacy rate, and the fact that everybody is a peasant. Modernization takes infinitely longer, and you'll never really have the capability to pump up the intelligentsia and trade unions like you can with other countries. Early on, the innovation cap is so painfully low that spamming out universities out of the gate won't even help you get out of the technology hole that Great Qing starts with. It's a pain, but that's just what you're dealing with. Anyways, that's enough rambling. Let's dive into it. Welcome to Great Qing. It is a vast country, a powerful country. It is also a country with a ridiculous amount of startup required to do properly. Qing has a bit of a literacy problem, and that literacy problem is going to prevent us from increasing research properly. That is why we're going to need a large quantity of authority for the sake of spamming social mobility decrees to fix that literacy problem. So I believe the very first focus of getting started should be pushing authority to at least 1,000. There are 2 steps needed for Great Qing to get 1,000 authority. The first is to go into the politics screen, clicking on the government tab, and then clicking on reform government to bring the Confucian scholars into the government. After you click confirm, you'll then see the Confucian scholars are now happy. And because they're happy, they give us divine right, which is a plus 10% authority bonus. Now, if you look at the very top here, authority is 960. We're already halfway there. But since we're already in the politics screen, we might as well reform the government again, and you actually have a choice from this point. You can go with the armed forces for the professional army, you can go with rural folk for tenant farmers or homesteading if you're feeling lucky, or my personal favorite when starting with Qing is going with the literati for the sake of going for landed voting. Now that you've picked a law to begin with, you'll probably notice that we're still only at 960 authority. That's hardly 1,000. To remedy this, we'll need to go to the budget screen, scroll down to government wages, and then click on very high government wages. That gives us another 10% authority bonus, which, as you can see here, gives us 1,000 authority. This is absolutely perfect for what we'll need to fulfill 10 social mobility decrees for the sake of increasing our literacy as fast as humanly possible. Placing the decrees can be a bit of a chore, especially since the goal is to put them in the highest population centers for the sake of increasing our country's total literacy as fast as we can. To make certain you're getting the best population centers, click on the political lens at the bottom of the screen. Doing so showcases dark green states all over the map. These dark green states are high political strength, but there's a direct correlation between the population of states and the amount of political strength in each of those states. So it's actually very safe to use this screen to pick out, without losing the screen, every social mobility that you need to place down. But there's a catch. There are two states in particular that I feel you absolutely have to have social mobility on. That would be Shaanxi and Beijing. These states are particularly important to have social mobility on because it also increases the amount of qualifications for the people living there. These two states, as well as other important states like Inner Mongolia, Southern Manchuria, and Hebei, all have coal, iron, and wood, which is very, very useful for building construction sectors. Doing this will keep the prices of your construction low because local prices of these vital construction materials will be kept low by local production. This can be indicated by the market access price impact shown on the State Information tab under Modifiers right here. While we're here in Shaanxi, we're going to click on the Buildings tab, and then we're going to queue up about 3 construction sectors, 5 iron mines, and 2 logging camps. You can do more construction sectors to start if you feel you can manage the debt, but I typically only begin with 3 when it comes to Qing. Then we're going to go up to the upper right corner of the screen and click on the construction button, and then we're going to click on the production model and change it to iron frame buildings. While you won't immediately notice until you unpause, this switch actually causes us to have an iron shortage along with the hardwood shortage that you see here that we already started with. To fix this invisible shortage of iron, we'll need to fix our trade. Let's start by deleting the trade routes that Qing starts with. We'll then bring up the import tab for iron, and we will then import whatever is available to us. It looks like just Russia is all that we have at the moment. Next up, we'll have to increase the amount of trade partners that we can work with by clicking on the diplomatic lens and then clicking on declare interests. I would suggest beginning by removing Japan and Bengal and adding the Rhine. Doing so will give us access to the French, Prussian, Belgian, and Dutch markets. Don't bother adding a third interest because you'll lose it soon after unpausing anyways. With trade dealt with, it's now time for us to begin rivaling everyone, and I do mean everyone. It doesn't matter which countries you rival, they're not going to really bother you. But it is very important that you get as much influence as you can because we're going to want to improve relations with Russia, Great Britain, and once our interest in the Rhine is done, we're going to want to improve with Prussia, France, maybe even the Netherlands if you feel like it. Now take some time to privatize every single building that you see underneath the Buildings tab. You're going to want that so that your industrialists and capitalists can buy up all of the property and then use it to make a lot of money to put into your investment pool over time. If you plan on reducing the power of the clergy, make certain to switch to secular administration on your government administration and later your universities. For this setup, I personally plan to keep clergy strong since intelligentsia and trade unions stay weak for the majority of a Qing playthrough. A powerful and happy clergy can give you a huge 20% authority bonus and minus 30% radicals, which is exceptionally useful for a Qing run. Moving on to technologies, you'll be faced with a difficult choice between stock exchange and romanticism. I personally always go with stock exchange for the 10% market price impact, which is huge for saving money early game. Going romanticism to unlock agrarianism isn't quite as big an impact, as you will still likely be implementing professional army, landed voting, tenant farming, or homesteading long after completing romanticism. Taking romanticism second is perfectly viable. Then, considering Qing has a serious issue with infrastructure, I always beeline for railways next. That's a lot of technologies right then and there, but even afterwards, you can also beeline for banking. The reason why I go for banking instead of central archives first is because the 10% minting is good for 7 to 20,000 gold once it's completed, as opposed to maybe 4,000 gold that you get from the plus 25 taxation capacity that you get from passing Central Archives and switching to the higher denomination for bureaucracy. You will still want to eventually grab Central Archives though, as well as passing appointed bureaucrats as a law later down the line, for the sake of alleviating some of the tax issues that Qing happens to have. Once the economy is prepped, you will now want to take some time to merge your armies together. You can make personal choices to the size of each army, but you will eventually want to start adding artillery to each army. You don't have to do it now. You can wait until you set up an artillery foundry first, but if you're impatient, you can always just trade for it. In preparation for future naval invasions, it's also a very, very good idea to merge your navy together, as well as creating a Marine Corps at the same size as your navy. We're finally done with the setup stage. The next thing we need to follow through on is unpausing and waiting until about January 26 for the opium crisis to begin. Once the opium crisis begins, we're then going to click on "We have to do something," because there's literally no reason to let Britain have its way with us when we can easily stop them from ever attacking us. To do that, you see this little section right here on the British East India Company? Right-click it and then click on Liberate Country. Select Target and then select Arakan. When you hit Confirm, you can then unpause it and wait for the diplomatic maneuver to appear. By doing so, you'll see the Shandong Treaty Port is here, but it's here as a secondary demand. This is very pivotal because what's going to happen is, because they have Qing war reparations as the primary demand, all secondary demands disappear the moment we back down. They don't count. That is perfect for us, because what we're going to want to do in this situation is we're going to want to click on Opium Crisis and then click Ban the Opium Trade right away. You can do it earlier, you can do it a little later, it's fine, as long as you do it around within a couple months of the diplomatic play showing up. Now, we're going to unpause it and we're going to actually wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, all the way to the very end of the escalation. We're slowly getting there. And make sure you slow down just a little bit when it comes up to this point. You don't want to miss it because it'll be very, very costly. Now you can actually pause it a little earlier. You can pause it at exactly value 99. It doesn't really matter as long as you just pause it before the war begins. The reason why is because you're now going to want to click back down. We just gave up the war. We lose. Such is life. But there's a little thing going on here. If you go back to the opium crisis, you'll see here 4 years, 8 months remaining. That is pivotal. You want to know why? Because if you bring up the diplomacy screen for Great Qing and you look at the truces, Great Britain has a truce with us for 5 full years. That is more than enough time for us to finish and permanently create the ban on the opium crisis, so we get it effectively for free. No war needed. With the opium crisis out of the way, you'll probably want to touch up on one more thing before you dive into the game, and that is creating a power block. Now, the two most useful options for a Qing run are the Ideological Union, which gives you access to the Creative Legislature, which is a whopping minus 33% enactment stall chance. That is very, very useful, especially if you're trying to pressure serfdom down and playing tall as Qing. But if you're like me and you enjoy tributizing every single tiny country in the world through your playthroughs, you can go for Sovereign Empire, which gives you a plus 25 authority per subject, which you can then use to create even more decrees or even taxes. Now, you have to remember that as Qing, when you create the power block, you're not going to have access to many other principles. So while you can get both vassalization and creative legislature on a single power block, you won't get construction or advanced research on your third and fourth ones until you increase the rating of your power block. So you're probably going to want at least construction as your second one instead of either getting creative legislature or vassalization, depending on what you pick as your first one. Anyhow, everybody, that's all I have for today. Thank you exceptionally much for watching, and I sincerely hope this setup puts you on the fast track to becoming a world superpower as Qing. Bye-bye for now.